What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10, and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we actually begin our talks on the newest addition, at least officially, to the Monk class, and that is the Ascendant Dragon Monk, and I am super excited to be talking about some Fizzbands content. I haven't gotten a chance to do any of that yet, but I am really looking forward to the new stuff. And so if you are too, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As you can see, most people who watch the channel are not subscribed, so please don't be one of those people. Help us to reach our goal of 5,000 by the end of this year. We can do it, but I need your help. Obviously, viewership has waned off quite a bit since Wizards pulled that stunt with the OGL, so I do need your help. Make sure to share the video with your friends, and of course, click the bell so that you're notified when new videos are uploaded. The Ascendant Dragon Monk is a really cool flavor, right? Who does not want to be a dragon-themed monk? I think it just sounds awesome, and there's just so much flavor there. There's such a cool story to tell. You know, what is it that drove you, one, to be a monk, but two, to study dragons? And how is it that you can study the world around you by means of studying dragons and gaining their power a little bit? I think that's just a really awesome story to tell, and it just sounds like a lot of fun. Is it mechanically satisfying though? We'll just have to find out today. Starting off at level 3, we get 2 features, and the first is Draconic Disciple. Now this is going to give us kind of our baseline of different types of features, both mechanical and more flavor and ribbon, and we'll just have to kind of weed through each one and see just how effective it is altogether. So with this, we get 3 different features. Number 1, we get Draconic Presence. So we can actually use our reaction to re-roll an intimidation or persuasion check when we go to fail it. And if this turns it from a failure to a success, then we cannot do it again until we finish a long rest. We also get Draconic Strike, which allows us to change the damage type of our unarmed strikes from our bludgeoning to acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison, one of the elemental types typically associated with dragons. And finally, Tongue of Dragons. We can speak, read, and write Draconic or another language of our choice, assuming that we already can speak Draconic. Now let's start with ribbon. Grabbing Draconic as a language is a ribbon feature, but it kind of makes sense to get something like this for your story, because I would imagine that you're going to be running into a dragon or two. At least I would hope so. It is called Dungeons and Dragons, and you are the Ascendant Dragon Monk. So I would hope that there's some kind of a correlation there. And so being able to speak with them sounds pretty cool, but mechanically it's not a huge thing. We also, of course, get Draconic Presence, which might help out once per day. But typically we're not going to be the face of the party because our charisma is probably going to be at best our 4th best stat. And so most of the time, this is going to be something that's on the lower end. And, you know, if we fail it, it just isn't something that we can rely on because we don't have that great of a charisma modifier most of the time as a monk. And finally, we have Draconic Strike. Now, Draconic Strike is interesting because it allows us to get around the bludgeoning damage type, which in fairness, a lot of times gets resisted if things are non-magical after you get to certain levels of creatures. Now, as a monk, we do, of course, get access to key-empowered strikes, which allows us to punch ghosts. It makes our punches magical, so we typically don't even have to worry about this. On top of that, let's think about these types of creatures. A lot of creatures out there, and by a lot, I mean like the vast majority, don't actually have vulnerabilities to these types of damage. Most creatures actually are either resistant or just have no interaction with certain damage types at all. And so this, I think, sounds really cool, but ultimately it kind of falls into the ribbon category. Now, where I make an exception for that is if you were multi-classing this with a Tempest Cleric, then there are some interesting things that work with that. Outside of that specific situation, I don't think this is all that great. So ultimately, outside of that one situation, this has got to be a 5 out of 10. I just don't think that it's nearly as useful as what it sounds, and most of this is just kind of ribbon stuff that probably isn't going to make a huge difference in the long run. Also at level 3, we get Breath of the Dragon, and this actually gives us access to a breath weapon, which is pretty cool. So we can actually replace one of our attacks during our turn to make a breath weapon attack. So it is not taking the attack action, it is if we have extra attack, we can punch once and then do this, or vice versa, which does help us out a little bit with our ability to be a little bit more versatile. And so with this, we can either make a 20-foot cone or a 30-foot long, 5-foot wide line. And it can of course be one of the damage types that we talked about earlier: acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison. And every creature that is within that area needs to make a dex save. If they pass that save, then of course they're going to take 2 rolls of your martial arts die. If they succeed, then they will of course take half of that. And this will go up to 3 rolls at level 11. You can do this a number of times per day, equal to your proficiency bonus, unless you want to spend 2 key points to do it again. Now, this is pretty interesting, and it sounds really cool on paper. Again, let's take a quick little math break here, the exciting part of D&D, doing math. So let's start out here at level 3, right? Let's say we've got a +3 or +4 bonus to our dexterity, and that's what we're using for our unarmed strikes. So on a punch, we're going to punch for a D4 plus either 3 or 4. Let's just say 3 for the sake of argument here. When we use our breath weapon, we're going to be rolling 2d4, which sounds better, but it's actually not, because the average roll on a d4 is 2.5, meaning that 3 is better. So as long as we have at least a 16 in dexterity, which I would hope you do, then you are better off not using this feature. Okay, well, let's go a little bit further. As this begins to scale, and you go up to a d6 for your martial arts die, hopefully your dex is also rising too. And so by the time you get a d6, then it's better to have a +4 modifier. By the time you get a d8, it's better to have a +5 modifier. And so as long as you're keeping up with your ASIs, you're going to be constantly ahead of this feature until you get to level 11. And that's a really long time to wait for a feature to become effective. And so the only reason that I would ever use this feature is if I've got enemies that are bunched up and I'm hitting multiple at once. This is not something to be used against one enemy. And that's kind of tough, right? Because we're going to be in a lot of one-on-one situations. We're going to be trying to keep people away from our friends. That's why Sentinel is on a lot of monks, because it locks people down and says, no, you don't get to go mess with my wizard or my sorcerer. You have to stay here with me. And this just makes it to where, you know, it just means you might hit your friends, so you've got to be careful there. But even beyond that, you're just better off punching. You then also are going to be giving up your ability to stunning strike on this attack too. So just overall, it's just better to punch until level 11, which is incredibly late for a feature to really come into its own that you got at level 3. For that reason, I've got to give this a 4 out of 10. It's just too slow of a burn for me, and it's too situational. I mean, yes, the 20-foot cone is decent, but like, I mean, once your enemies see you do that, they're probably going to steer clear, and you're probably not going to get to use it again. So I just don't see this being nearly as useful as what it sounds on paper. At level 6, we get Wings Unfurled, and so this sounds like we're going to get a really awesome flight feature. Well, kind of. So whenever we take our Step of the Wind bonus action by spending 1 key to either dash or disengage, then we can actually give ourselves a flying speed equal to our walking speed until the end of that turn. When we use that feature, of course, we can only do that a number of times per day equal to our proficiency bonus, but there is not the ability to spend key in order to do it again. Now with this, it sounds, again, really, really cool. And in fairness, this is definitely better than what we just talked about. Flight is always a good thing, and especially when it's combined with Step of the Wind, because either you're disengaging and getting out of there, and so flight could help you to be able to get away somewhere nice. More importantly, though, you're also dashing here, or at least you could be dashing. And that's where I see this being a lot more effective of getting over like a really far cavern. Of course, your movement speed is going to be higher than most other people's, being a monk. And so that's going to help you to be able to traverse these big areas with flight. The only problem is, of course, that it only lasts for 1 turn, and it costs your bonus action, and it costs a key. So that is a little bit a little bit limiting in that case. And so, yes, while it's good, it is incredibly limited at the same time. So we've got kind of a weird middle ground to find on a feature like this. Overall, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. You only get it for a turn. Whereas we're looking at classes that are much better than the monk, such as the cleric, and on the Twilight Cleric, which also gets some really great features, they get free flight for a minute, proficiency bonus times per day at level 6. And so for me, of course, I can't directly compare subclasses between two classes, but I mean, come on, the cleric chassis is already better than the monk chassis. Why is it that the monk's feature is dumbed down as opposed to the other? I just don't understand. So this is just a much worse version of something that could have been really cool. At level 11, we get Aspect of the Worm, and this actually gives us a little aura around us, 10 feet in radius, and we can use it to do one of two things. So as a bonus action, when we activate this, we can choose to either use Frightful Presence or Resistance. With Frightful Presence, we can target one creature within our aura and make it make a Wisdom saving throw against our key save. If it fails, then it is going to be frightened of us for 1 minute, and it can repeat that save at the end of its turn. With Resistance, we can activate this and choose a damage type of our choosing, which of course is that same list from before: Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, Poison. And anybody that is within that aura, including us, gets resistance to that damage as long as the aura is active. We can use this, of course, once per day, or at least long rest, and if we want to use it again, we can spend 3 ki to do so. So this is another one of those features that sounds really cool on paper, but again, falls a little bit short. Number one, why is it only 10 feet? That is incredibly limited. Now, I get it, we're a monk, and we're going to be up in the fray a lot of the time. We can move really, really quickly around the battlefield, and so that's pretty cool. However, again, we're looking at like aura type abilities. The only one that has a 10-foot aura that's coming to my mind that is like prominently used would be the Paladin, and even the Paladin at high level gets a buff. With things like the, again, Twilight Cleric, which I'm looking at, that is a much bigger aura when it activates that on its channel divinity. So we're looking at these things that are just nerfed in comparison to other classes that are just better. And that's just a really hard thing to look over and see when we've got here a one target frighten effect. It's not even every creature within the aura. It's only one creature that's in the aura. So that's also really limiting. Why isn't it every creature of our choice in the aura? I really feel like that's not too much to ask, but I just don't understand that. And then, of course, resistance. Resistance is kind of a deceiving feature that may get some use here and there if you are in like a narrow tunnel and you know that there's going to be some like fire or acid come down the tunnel or something like that, maybe. But otherwise, you're going to be better off splitting up rather than ganging up in order to get resistance to the fireball that's incoming. I just think that this is going to end up leading more to bad tactics than it is to survivability when I could just run the other direction and not take the fireball at all. So ultimately, again, I think this is just kind of a deceiving feature that makes itself out to be a lot better than what it is. I've got to give this a 4 out of 10. It's just incredibly limited, and it just kind of works you into a bit of a corner that I'm just not a huge fan of. Finally, at level 17, we get Ascendant Aspect, and this allows us to be the ultimate in Dragon Monk technology. And so what is it that we get? Well, we get 3 different options. Number 1, we get Augment Breath, and this allows us to actually make our breath weapon a lot better. So we get to not only make the range a lot bigger, it is now 60 feet of a cone and a 90-foot long line that is 5 feet wide. But we also now deal 4 rolls of our martial arts die, and of course half as much on a save. This definitely makes this a lot more worth using. We also get Blind Sight out to 10 feet. Finally, Explosive Fury, we can actually choose creatures that would be within our aura's radius when we go to activate our level 11 feature, and they have to make a dexterity saving throw against our key save. If they fail, they take 3d10 acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage, but if they succeed, they take 0. So Augment Breath is obviously the standout option here, right? So with this, we of course get to massively increase the range, or at least area, that we are affecting with this breath, and we're dealing more damage. 4 rolls, which is 4d10, is pretty good, and I will spend 1 key to be able to do this. I think that is more than worth it, especially since that's just taking 1 of my attacks. So that's pretty cool, actually. I really like this. Definitely a huge improvement. We're doing all right so far. Blind Sight. This sounds really good, except for when you realize that you could get this exact same thing at level 1 of Fighter. Literally any character could take this at level 1 if they started in Fighter. And why am I waiting 17 levels to get something like this? I could have had this from the beginning and it really wouldn't have made a huge difference. Fighters get this off the bat, and that is just not good. That is not okay to be waiting this long to be getting something that anyone can get at level 1. And finally, Explosive Fury. This was almost good until they did not let you deal half damage on a successful save. It's a 10-foot radius. You've already got to put yourself in a pretty harmful position to be able to hit multiple enemies with this explosion because of how limited the range is. Then, of course, if they make that save against your key save, which may or may not be good depending on how you've been able to do your stats, if they succeed, then it means nothing, and you've put yourself into a potentially deadly or at least dangerous situation that is not so advantageous for you. And I think that this is going to lead to a lot of people doing something that's dumb for the sake of 3d10 extra damage that may or may not happen at all. So I just don't think that that's really that good either. So Augment Breath, really good. The other two, not so great. So I'm going to go with a 6 out of 10 on this. I just don't think that it's worth putting yourself in a bad situation for the explosion. Blind Sight, we could have gotten a long time ago. Augment Breath is great, but it's being dragged down by those other two. So where do we land on the Ascendant Dragon Monk? This is another tough one, man. Like, I just want this to be good. I want monks to be good, but yet they give us stuff like this. I just don't understand why it is that all of the subclasses, at least almost all of them, are bad. I think that they think that having a really good subclass on a monk is going to be overblown, and that because it has Stunning Strike that we are really limited on what we can and can't do with the monk. And it's just every single time I look at one of these new subclasses when I'm doing research for these, I just get disappointed. And that's really what I saw with this one. I was so excited for the flavor, and I started reading the mechanics of it, and it's not good. It's just not good at all. So my final verdict is going to be a 5 out of 10. It does fail, and so I'm going to have to make a fix for this later on this week. But I am excited to make this fix. I have actually been thinking about this fix for a while now because I really do like the subclass flavor. It just needs some bumps here and there, and I've got some ways to do it. So I may accidentally go OP with it, and I'm going to need you all in the comments to hold me back from going too far, but I might just make a 10 out of 10 or an 11 out of 10 type subclass, and I want to see what you all think about it. So make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss that video when it goes live, and click that bell. Make sure to leave a like on this video, and of course, stay safe out there until we see you again. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.